Let's talk about capos. A capo is a simple to use, very cheap and unbelievably useful bit of kit, and whatever kind of guitarist you are, you really ought to have a capo with you at all times. So in this session I'm going to talk about the different types of capo, why you'd want to use them, how they work. There's going to be a tiny bit of theory, and then at the end we're going to look at a few real-world examples of capos in practice. So to begin with, let's just look at a few different types. I've got loads of different ones here. This is perhaps the simplest one. This is just basically an elastic band that goes around your guitar neck. I don't like these ones very much. They are very reliable, but you need to tug them quite a bit, and then you kind of plonk it over like that, and there you are. That's the capo in place. This one, and when I show you these here, you'll perhaps see what it is about the red one you just saw that isn't quite what you want. This one, if you can see, has a little profile to it. Can you see it's got a kind of a curved surface, whereas this one doesn't. This one's completely straight. And in fact, you may know that guitar necks have a profile that is a slightly arched surface on them, slightly convex. All electric guitars have this, and most steel string acoustics do. Classical guitars tend to have a flat fingerboard, so this kind of thing is very good for a classical guitar, and the flat profile fits perfectly across the fingerboard of a classical guitar. It does kind of bend a little bit too, there's a bit of flex in there, so you could use this on a fingerboard that's got a profile, but really you want to look out for one that has a bit of a profile to it. Okay, that's the second kind, and again this one just wraps around like this. You've got to mess about finding the right notch. That's okay. You probably want the next one there, and that's got a grip a little bit, that sort of thing. Okay, that's easy enough. This is another type, this kind of grip here. You'll find these for sale everywhere. They're quite useful because you can use a single hand to put them in place. To be honest with you, are you supposed to put them this side or this side? I don't really know, but I think it does depend a little bit on the sort of thing you're going to be doing with the capo, what sort of thing you're going to play, what sort of things you expect your fingers to be doing. But that just goes across like this. I will just say that a decent one of these will cost maybe 25-30 quid. This was a cheap one. I bought it from Amazon, and it's not very good. This is it was a £6 or £7 one. And there is a big difference between the ones that are well made and cheap ones like this. So, you know, be prepared to spend a little bit of money. I've got another kind here, which is a bit more of a specialized one. This one has a roller to it, and you might wonder why you want to do that. Well, that clips on here like this. And in fact, this is a bit snazzy, you can actually change the position of this without taking it off. You can kind of roll it up and down the neck. That's quite a nifty capo. That one's a bit more expensive, but again, I've got a cheap kind of knockoff one of those that isn't nearly as good. But this is the kind that I like to use most of all. This is a shub capo, S-H-U-B-B. And the thing about this that I particularly like is that it's got a little adjusting screw. You can see that here, and that's going to tighten or loosen this little arm here that clips around the back of the guitar neck. And that's useful because you can adjust how tight the capo is on the neck. So right here, that's a little bit loose. Up here, where the neck's a bit thicker, that's a really good grip, but that might not be the kind of grip you want down here. I would probably tighten this up. That's better. Okay, so this one, as I say, has that little tightening screw, and also it's got that slightly curved profile that fits perfectly across the neck of my guitar. Okay, so what does it do? What does a capo actually do? Well, the obvious thing to say is it effectively shortens the strings of the guitar, just like if you're putting your fingers on the frets. And what that does is raise the pitch of your guitar. So if I play a chord here, here's an E minor, and I put the capo here, this is up on the 5th fret for instance, and play that E minor again. That's a higher chord. It's got the same basic sound, it sounds minor, but it's higher. That was my E minor. And now with the capo here, it sounds like this. So what's the difference? Well, actually, listen to this. That's an A minor. So in fact, I put the capo high enough up on the 5th fret to render my E minor shape so that it sounds like an A minor chord. So how does that work? Well, you may or may not know that when we use the 7 letter names A, B, C, D, E, F, G, mostly neighbouring pairs are 2 frets apart. So here's the open 5th string of the guitar, that's an A. And if I put a finger on the 2nd fret, that's now B. There are 2 frets difference between A and B. And if you're not really sure about frets and tones and semitones, I've got a bunch of music theory videos in my Sound Bites series. There's one on the octave, you'll see that coming up now. There's one on the major scale, and then I've got various ones, including one on intervals that should hopefully clear all that up. Now, they're almost always 2 frets apart, C to D, D to E, for instance, G to A, but there are a couple of places where there's only 1 fret's difference between the 2 neighbouring letter names, and that's between E and F and B and C. So for instance, this is an E, the open bottom string. I put a finger on the 1st fret, that takes me up to F already. There's only 1 fret. Same with B to C. The 2nd string open is a B, and if I put a finger on the 1st fret, that's now a C. So what I'm saying here is that if I play an A minor shape, for instance, and then put a capo on the 2nd fret and play that A minor again, that's now B minor, 2 frets higher. A up 2 frets is B minor. But if I raise it just 1 more fret, it's now C minor. Okay, so there's a little kink in the scale between B and C and E and F where we only have to go up 1 fret to get to the next letter name, or down to get to the previous one. Now, a few things to bear in mind, I guess, when you're putting a capo on. Whereabouts in the fret does it go? I like to put mine a little bit closer behind the back of the next fret wire. But if you put it really close, it's going to interfere perhaps with the fingers. So yeah, something like that, maybe 2/3 of the way towards the next fret wire is probably about right. If it's too tight, you're going to actually stretch the strings and detune them. Now, you might find that if you tune the guitar before you put the capo on and then put the capo on, you might just need to tweak that tuning a little bit, but you shouldn't have to, especially if you're not using too much pressure and you don't detune the strings as a result. The other thing is maybe make sure you're not pulling the strings across, because if you're doing that and the strings move down, they're going to stretch and they're going to detune. So ideally, you want to have your guitar in tune before you put the capo on, and then once the capo's there, it should still be in tune. But, you know, be prepared. You might have to make a little tweak in the tuning to get it right. So when and why would we want to use a capo? Well, I'll give you a really simple example. Here's Amazing Grace. This is the song I always bring out as an example for pretty much anything. That's too low for me right there. But I like these chords. I like the C and the F. I like the way that sounds. So what I would do is use a capo just to raise the pitch of the guitar, and that's going to raise the pitch of the song. Let me try that on the 2nd fret. That's a bit better for me. So where is that? Well, that's a chord of C, but now it's raised 2 frets. 2 frets higher than C is D. That's okay. Maybe a couple of frets higher, D to E. So now look, I'm playing what looks like a C shape. But it's actually an E. Okay, so that's not bad for me. If my voice were warmed up, if I were any kind of singer at all and my voice were warmed up, then I might want to project a bit more and maybe raise it there. Na da 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 pretty much perfect for me. I'm now playing not in C, D, E, but one more fret, E to F, that's just one fret. I'm actually now playing Amazing Grace in the key of F, and that's pretty good. I wouldn't want to play Amazing Grace using chords in the key of F, because that's just... I've got to use the B flat. That's horrible, all those bar chords. So this way, I can play in a key that's comfortable for my voice, using shapes that are comfortable for me as a guitarist, and it all works out nicely. Now, in the case of Amazing Grace, who cares what key it's in? Somebody asks me, what key is Amazing Grace in? I'm going to say, well, whatever key suits you, but there are songs that you want to play in the original key, or there may be music written out, or other instrumentalists or vocalists want to play it in a particular key that doesn't suit you as a guitarist, and a capo can get you out of a scrape there. A good example of that is the song Stand By Me, which is actually in the key of A originally. Now let's just say you wanted to play it in that key. When the night has come, that's A, and then F sharp minor, and the land is dark. Now let's say I don't want to play that bar chord there, F sharp minor. I mean, I don't mind playing bar chords, but I can make it a bit easier on myself. If I put a capo on the 2nd fret, watch what happens. The question here is, what chord shape would I have to play that sounds like an A? Now remember, I want to keep this in the original key for whatever reason. And if I play a G, when the night has come, oh, E minor, look at that, that's an E minor. Now of course, in fact, that's the same as the F sharp minor I had before, because the capo is acting as a bar chord. But by putting a capo on the 2nd fret, I can use a more comfortable family of chords, and I'm staying in the original key. In fact, whereas originally I would have had A, F sharp minor, D and E7, now I've got G, E minor, C and D7. When the night has come, the land is dark, and the moon is the only light we'll see. Okay, and those chords are really comfortable for the guitar. So there's an example there of using the capo so I can have chords that are more straightforward for the guitar, and I haven't changed the key of the original. And if you work with horn players, trumpets, tenor saxophones, alto saxophones, and oftentimes singers, they'll want to play in keys that really aren't particularly comfortable for the guitar, but by using the capo you can keep a familiar chord family going and remain in the right key. So we've had a look at a couple of slightly different examples of a capo in use. In the case of Amazing Grace, I didn't really care what key it was in, I just wanted to shove the capo up the neck until it suited my range, and that's a classic use of the capo. And then the other that we had with Stand By Me, we wanted to preserve the original key of A, and I just wanted to make it easier on myself. That calculation, by the way, of what key we're going to play in if we put the capo somewhere, what you do is this. So in the case of Stand By Me, we put the capo on the 2nd fret. That raises the pitch of the guitar by 2 frets or a tone, and I need to compensate by thinking down 2 frets. So if the original key is A, 2 frets below that is G. So if I play a G with a capo on the 2nd fret, then I'm going to actually be in the key of A. If I'd have put it on the 4th fret, which is a crazy thing to do, I'd end up playing an F, because A down 2 is G, down another 2 is F. If I play an F here, with a capo on the 4th fret, actually that sounds like an A. And of course what I might as well do then is put a capo on the 5th fret, down 2 A to G, down another 2, G to F, down one more, F to E, and play in E. There we go, so I'm playing an E chord with a capo on the 5th fret, and that sounds like an A. So that's the calculation, or that's the method if you like. For every fret up you put the capo, you need to think one semitone down with the chord name that you're using. Okay, so classic uses of the capo. Let's look at a few more cases where you might want to use the capo, and now it amounts basically to putting the capo high enough up on the neck that you're actually changing the sound of the guitar. And I don't just mean the key, but if you put the capo up on the, let's say, the 7th fret. Now if I start to play up here, it almost sounds like a different instrument. Now if you are performing or recording with a couple of acoustic guitars, say, or electric guitar, and you've got some kind of full sounding guitar and you want a second guitar to accompany that, and you don't want them to tread on each other's toes, sonically speaking, then putting a capo up high and working out some shapes that are going to work there is a really good way of creating a bit of difference between two instruments that would otherwise perhaps sound quite similar. So that's a really useful thing to bear in mind. Now, if you're familiar with the Carter family, if you're a country fan, you will be, and particularly the guitar style of Mabel Carter, then you'll know that she used a pioneering picking style that became known as Carter picking. And what she would do typically is place a capo somewhere in the middle of the neck, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th fret, to raise the pitch significantly. And here's what happens. She would play a melody in an instrumental break, say, with the melody played on the bass strings, but because the capo is higher up, it doesn't really sound bassy at all. The melody is in the range of a kind of typical vocal melody. In fact, with the capo on the 5th fret, if we play Amazing Grace, we'll be where we were at the beginning for Amazing Grace. Now, if I attempt to strum the chords as well, I might get something approaching a Carter picking style version of this. That's the sort of thing. Wildwood Flower is probably the very best example of that. That's a very famous Carter picking tune, and there's a fantastic example of Carter picking in that. Okay, here's another example of a song that uses the capo high up on the neck just to change the sound. And in fact, it's a bit of a mystery, or it might be a bit of a mystery, why he did this. But here's Dylan's Blowing in the Wind. In fact, it uses a G shape, more or less in tune, all the way up here. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? And how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? So what key are we actually in here? Well, there's a G with a capo right up there. Let's count from here. G, up 2 would be A, up another 2 would be B, one more would be C. So in fact, we're playing in the key of D. Now, actually, without the capo, you could just play in the key of D. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how, and so on. But having the capo up here just does a little something to the sound of the guitar. Okay, so it suits Dylan's playing style, but it also sounds just brighter and fresher and a little different up here. So that's an example where it would have been perfectly easy to play standard chords without the capo, but putting it up here just gives it a special sound. And in fact, in the Dylan book that I did, this big old thing here. This is the complete Dylan. I'll show you an example here of, if I can find it, this is that song, and the way I've notated it here, you can see that. Now, in fact, I've got the chords written as if they were being played without the capo, so that's clearly a G shape, but I've also got the name of the chord as it sounds. So a G shape played with a capo on the 7th fret is going to give you a chord of D. You won't always find that. But I'm a proper guitar editor. I've got some lovely James Taylor books up there where they do the same thing, and I was really inspired by that, in fact, that I thought that was a really useful thing. If you've got a capo marked and you've got chord shapes, name them for the normal familiar shapes, but also for the way they sound. Okay, one more example. Here Comes the Sun by George Harrison, which is actually in the key of A, but with a capo on the 7th fret. And playing chords as if he were in D, that works out. I've also got the 6th string tuned down, so I'm playing in a drop D tuning. That's neither here nor there. But little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since